Welcome to the L&D Go Beyond podcast. Today, we have Jenifer Tsang with us. Jen has been with Cisco for about 19 years. She's been in L&D for almost all of these years before she moved into the position of Chief of Staff last year. Her passion is to empower people to see their leadership potential. She also has a podcast of her own called In the Lead, which I highly recommend you check out. I'm very excited to have Jen join us today as we're going to be talking about how to solve the right problems in L&D. So that's an exciting topic for me. Jen, very welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you asking me to join the show. I'm really excited to have this conversation.
Brilliant. All right. So Jen, before we get started, would you like to share something about your L&D journey so far and what excites you today?
Oh, wow. That is a big question. So as you mentioned, right? So I've been in L&D and I've been at Cisco Systems for actually more than 19 years. I think it's going on more than 20 years. So I started out actually as an intern many years ago. And this was back in, the .com days, right? When Cisco was this massive company. They were, growing exponentially, and I happened to land an internship role there. And I love the company so much, I never left. But I've actually had a couple of different almost careers throughout my time at Cisco. So I've worked in a few different functions within L&D at Cisco. So I've worked in the function for the most of my career has been in the technical learning function and within Cisco. So it's more of the certifications business. It's more of the internal technical enablement of our technical roles at Cisco. But I've also worked in the partner and sales organization. I've worked in other functions within the technical learning at Cisco, but most of my time has been focused on enabling the technical audiences at Cisco. So it's been an interesting career, and I've had an opportunity to work with a lot of different people and a lot of different roles. And one of the things that I was always curious about was we spend a lot of time talking about the need for training. And I don't feel we spend enough time trying to understand the real needs of training, because I've noticed as I've been there for many years, the same kind of problems keep resurfacing. And for me, it was just always using that curiosity to say, I wonder why these same problems keep coming up. If we are providing all this training, we're a large company, we have a lot of resources, we can do almost anything. Like, why are these same problems coming up? And that's where I start getting into. And you mentioned I'm also an ICF leadership coach. So I'm a certified coach. So I have kind of that natural curiosity that really leads a lot of what I do. So it's about really uncovering what is the root of the problem. What are we really trying to solve here? And I think we can do that with L&D. It's just a matter of how do we get to the right problems and solve those instead of just, because I see it a lot, we just throw training at things, right? We have a request, we have a need. Let's just develop the training and be done. And then the same requests keep coming up. So it's this cycle, right? So it's like, how do we, if we really want, because at Cisco, we talk a lot about upskilling and how do we reskill people for the future, of technology. This is something that's very, very important. And it's something that is very fluid and it moves quickly. So how do we ensure that our training is agile? How do we ensure we're training to the right things, like the right technologies? How are we ensuring we're training and solving the problems that they have today? So long-winded answer, but what I'm really passionate about is not only within L&D, but really getting to that problem. And like you mentioned, I am really passionate about leadership and how can we even unlock leadership potential within L&D practitioners, architects, designers. How can we unlock their leadership potential to help uncover and solve the right problems?
Excellent. I like that. The journey, really impressive. And more importantly, for our discussion today, it almost sets the stage. You've been doing this almost all your life at Cisco, trying to identify why what real problems are we trying to solve, and why are we really not solving them? Why are they kind of coming again and again and again? Fantastic. We'll obviously delve a little deeper. You've done this for many years, and we'd like to learn how to do for our audiences. But what is it that excites you today? Leadership, of course, is one area. Is there anything else that you keenly focused on?
Yeah, I mean, I would say leadership, but I would also say bringing that mindset of coaching
Mhm.
to everybody. So I think there is a perception that coaching is reserved for certain people or certain titles or certain functions, but really it's just a way of being, kind of like how I look at leadership, and how even can we bring the coaching principles into L&D to uncover the right problems? Because I mean, at the end of the day, that's at the core of coaching, is how do we uncover what is at the root of whatever issue is coming up, right? Because people usually talk in the symptomatic terms, right? They say, oh, I feel like we need training because we get so many cases and we don't have the right skills and the right engineers and the roles, right? They're operating at this very symptomatic level, but how can we get deeper? How can we go deeper to go, okay, what is exactly at this? Because we'll notice there's a cycle, right? The same like statement comes up every year at the same time. And it's like, maybe some of it's organizational. Maybe we can't solve it with L&D, but how can we start identifying those things so we're putting our efforts and resources in the right places and solving, again, right problems, instead of just reacting to whatever symptoms are coming up from the business.
Very interesting. Thanks for sharing that, Jen. Yeah. All right. So, I wanted to get started with this conversation just to understand from your perspective. When you say right problems, what do you mean by right problems? I mean, is there a way to elaborate a little more on that? Give some examples so our listeners would be able to identify. Okay, this is probably a symptom of a problem, if that's what you meant earlier.
Yeah, I look at it more like symptoms. I really kind of resist the right wrong kind of approach. I don't know, as a coach, it just kind of rubs me because I don't think things are right or wrong, but it's more of, are these symptoms? And so it's like, for instance, right? Like, let's say you have chest pains, right? You go to the doctor and you say, oh, I have chest pains. I have chest pains. And they might come up with a diagnosis, right? But they'll probably ask you a series of questions. They'll do some testing to try and get to like what is causing those chest pains, right? So same with L&D is like, you come to me and say, I can't handle any more training. Like, we just can't. Like, we have too much training. We don't have enough time. That is a common thing that we hear in L&D at Cisco, is we don't have any more time for training. But they'll come in the same breath and say, well, we need more training because we need to be skilled and we need. So what I hear in that, right, is, I've been putting my coaching hat on, is maybe the right training isn't being delivered at the right time. Maybe what they're saying is we don't have time to take, big grandiose trainings that take up weeks of our time, but we need maybe just in time type training where it's delivering it in the time of need, the exact information that we need, where it's almost kind of like me, where with the podcast, I've had to teach myself a lot of different video editing software. I don't want to become a video editor, but I can go to YouTube and I can do searches, right? And I could find in my time of need, how do I, make this quick edit, right? So how do we enable people to be able to learn in the moment, maybe not necessarily need big structured training, but can we provide them training in the moment that can help solve maybe that immediate need, and then look down the line at different types of training? So for me, it's about really understanding and listening and saying, okay, what am I hearing? I'm hearing these two different things that seem to kind of, they don't really go together, right? They kind of oppose their desires. So what is the real problem, right? So again, you can get to that through questions. You can start asking deeper questions and then expand and go start asking others. I find, especially within internal training, we tend to focus on, let's talk to leadership. Let's ask for their, what are their, what's their vision for the next year? What are they seeing? What are they hearing from their teams? But have we actually gone and talked to the teams? Have we actually talked to the engineers that we're serving to ask them what their experience is, to maybe talk to line managers? What is your team facing? on a daily basis. And then as you start having more of those conversations, you start to hear those themes, and maybe it's not even what we had initially thought the problem was. So it's, again, for me, it's about asking more questions and being more open and taking that time to really try and identify those themes that you're hearing in conversations to say, okay, that's probably one of the roots that we need to kind of explore and go after. So that's just my mindset, is like really understanding truly what the problem is before we just react and go out and start creating content and start designing, learning, because a lot of times it kind of falls flat. It doesn't really have a long shelf life. People aren't really engaged. It becomes a checkbox activity. And that is something I've been against since the day I started. It's like, I want people to learn, and I want people to have an experience, and I want them to walk away with something. So that's just my own personal mentality and how I kind of see L&D and how I approach it.
Very interesting. When you were talking about the doctor trying to find reasons for your chest pain, I was kind of also thinking about something that I've been trying to think about and possibly pen down a few lines on, taking L&D from being a waiter L&D to a doctor L&D, where you're just taking orders versus getting into a more analytical consulting structure. But yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the reasons why we may not be able to really provide the right kind of value. But the things that you were telling in terms of how you uncover the real problems, my mind is thinking about various methods that can be used to get there. And maybe what you're doing is kind of a gist of some of those are overlapping. A root cause analysis, maybe a 5 why technique, maybe a little bit of design thinking, especially in the initial stage when you need to have that empathy to really understand your consumer, not just the stakeholders. So are you structurally bringing some of these techniques into uncovering the real needs?
Yeah. I've been trained in design thinking. That's definitely rooted in a lot of what I do. But yes, absolutely. So doing root cause analysis is important. I'm a little bit of a renegade in some aspects, though, as I take a little bit, like you probably picked up on, a little bit of all those things, right? And because for me, I'm more centered around the conversation. I'm not as focused on being technical and following some kind of process, but I want to understand what it is that you're experiencing and what it is that you feel on a day-to-day basis, and what is in your way. What is that roadblock? What is that roadblock that I can help remove for you? Or how can I help you with, maybe give you a ladder to kind of help you get over that roadblock? But what are those conversations that I can have that can help you? Because you may not even know, right? Like you might not even know what is at the root of what you're experiencing. You might just know the symptom, right? Of, I'm just really burned out and the team just really needs training, but I don't know how to deliver it. That's where, again, that root cause analysis, design thinking is very much rooted in my way of being, is how do we take that approach to solving that problem for you? And that is absolutely, and again, I don't see that as much in the broader L&D space, at least from what I've seen, is like, we don't take the time to do that. We're just that waiter, right? We're taking orders, we're responding, we're serving it, and we're leaving. And there's a lot of gaps there that I think we miss in L&D, and I think we spend a lot of time also, I'll say, on the design part, which I think is very important. But at the same time, I think equally as important is, again, getting to what problem are we trying to really solve here? And that starts with a lot of that due diligence up front, asking those questions, using those methods to identify those causes.
So Jen, if anybody in L&D is really thinking about providing solutions and services, it should be fairly easy for them to see that some of the things that they may be doing is not really solving the core or the real problem. Maybe it is at the surface. It should be easy. I'm assuming. But do you see there are more, or there is more to that L&D sometimes is not able to solve the real problems? Is it a skill challenge that they may have, people who are not able to do it? Is it a mindset challenge, or maybe it's how the just the way an organization is structured, a cultural challenge, if you can call it?
I think it's all of the above. I would say it's mostly cultural, and I would say also mindset. I I'm smiling because that is something that I think about a lot, because I feel like just in business in general, no matter what sector, no matter what line of business you're in, it is so short-sighted. We're only looking at this quarter or the next quarter. Like, okay, so how many people do we train this quarter? The very standard metrics, right? And one of the programs that we've worked on internally was actually creating this journey. So I mentioned in the beginning also experience. That's something that's very important to me. It's about not only the actual content itself, but it's the experience that the learner is going through and understanding, again, that experience. So we created a journey, right? Of this is something that's being worked on internally of, when somebody comes into the organization, what is their journey to proficiency for that particular role? And making sure to really clearly understand what are those different competencies, what are the different kind of checkpoints we want to have throughout the journey to say, okay, have you attained this much knowledge? Can we verify that, right, through assessments and maybe scenario testing, things like that. But really mapping out the journey, I think, is also really critical, and understanding the role. I think that is also a really critical piece, is like, do you really understand your audience? Like I'm not, you don't have to do the role, but do you understand like what they're doing on a day-to-day basis? Have you done any kind of a job task analysis to say, what type of activities do you do throughout your day? Are there any times when we can maybe fit in some of that quick micro learning, right? That gives you maybe either in the time of need or gives you just some flexibility to be able to view maybe a 10-minute, training video, and then maybe put you through some scenario testing. But I think L&D goes again beyond just creating the typical corporate, here's a 1-hour video, even maybe take you through some simulations, then we'll test you, and then you're done. And to me, that always feels like we're just checking the box, right? We're just saying, okay, we did this. But I always ask myself going through these things, I'm like, what are you trying to test me on right now? What are you really expecting from me? Because I could probably just cheat my way through this and just be done, and I won't remember this in a week, or, to me, it just feels like, what's the value there? I don't know. I mean, that's why I love developing these programs, because it feels more of an experience for looking at the role, looking at the organization and the culture, and trying to bring all of that together to provide an experience that will help people actually move down their career journey and help enable them through that.
Yeah. So if we were to tie it back to the previous question, maybe culture and mindset are kind of forming each other. So culture is obviously influencing the mindset, and mindset is leading to the kind of culture that we create. But if both of them are right, skills will then still be required. And some of the things that you talked about are essentially, people will need skills if they were to go down that route. If they have to create what you talked about, of course, they don't need to be just being quarterly focused. But if they're creating a journey, which is something like an experience, you talked about journey to proficiency, for which you need to understand the roles, right? And in enough details. Now, I have two parts question to that. One, if you have a large organization like Cisco, and if you were to start today to create those journeys to proficiency, how much time does it take to create those journeys to proficiency for a large organization? I mean, just for people to get a sense that if you were to start today and say, okay, we'll do all of this, does it take 1 year, 2 years, more?
takes a long time, right? So there's been a few different things going on within Cisco around this in different areas and different functions, but it's been at least a 2 to 3 year journey to. But that's also where design thinking and MVPs and things like that come in, where it's like you don't have to design the whole program, right? We've taken an agile approach to it where we're kind of focusing, we're putting certain focus areas on, okay, help us prioritize what is the most critical place to start first, right? So maybe it's actually mid-career, right? We actually have a lot of people in their mid-careers who are looking to transition into this phase, and we need to help them with that transition. Okay, so we'll start there. So it might even be, you're not really doing it in a logical way, but you're helping kind of paint the picture for them. So it is a long-term journey. And I think sometimes in business that kind of makes, especially executives and leadership, kind of a little antsy, because again, I think they want to see the immediate results. They want to see, the immediate tangible, how can we measure this in 1 quarter, 2 quarters? But it is a commitment and it is a journey. But I think it starts with that mindset, right? And I think that's where L&D professionals can also help kind of shift that, is how do you craft that story and how do you help shift that mindset away from, the waiter to more of that doctor approach where we're diagnosing symptoms and we are providing wellness, right? Long-term wellness for people so that they can, be enabled, empowered, educated throughout their career. Because at the end of the day, right, corporations want people to stay. It costs a lot of money and a lot of resources the higher your attrition rates are. And that's one of the big things we hear a lot too, is like, people are coming constantly, a churn in the organization, which is causing a lot of problems with L&D, right? Because we have people we now need to upskill and get them back up to the level of the resources that we lost. So it really is a long game. I mean, it's a long game for them too. And helping them see that and helping paint that story for them, I think will help with that cultural and mindset shift. But I think it starts with the L&D function and having that really strong mindset and being able to help influence that within the business.
So, the very interesting point about the, losing people. And so it may be a chicken and egg problem here, where if you don't train them well and with a kind of a long-term view, you are going to lose them. And then you are kind of doing the firefighting on a more regular basis. So it's actually counterproductive if you don't take the long view.
Right. And again, some of those things are out of our control, right? I mean, there are just some, even at Cisco, there are some functions that you just know the attrition is going to be a lot higher than some other roles, right? And understanding that and also trying to work with it to try and enable as many people as possible to want to stay in role through learning, right? Give them the skills that they need, give them the tools that they need, but also a lot of it's about giving them the time, right? I mean, I'm sure you guys hear that a lot too, where it's like, oh, we need training, but oh my gosh, we're so busy. We don't have the time. Like, I can't take my engineers, off the queues for, 10 hours a week. Like what? So it's always this balancing act, but I do agree. I think it is kind of this chicken and the egg kind of scenario where it's like, I think we can only do as much as we can, but I think we can do a lot as far as shifting mindset and culture around looking at more of the long game and taking more of that, like you said, the doctor approach of diagnosing and really understanding the symptoms rather than just serving content, because that's really not going to serve your clients or your constituents.
True. The other part of my question from your earlier response was for L&D to do, job task analysis or understanding the roles that people are playing. They may not be able to really understand the details of, exactly what everybody does, but is it advisable to make the line managers your partner? Because it is usually they who really understand the roles, but then it boils down to the culture, unless it is in the culture that the line managers own up some part of that training responsibility and progression of their people, that kind of responsibility, they may not partner.
Mhm.
But once you've sorted that puzzle, they are your best friend.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, I think especially at a big company. I mean, I don't even want to tell you how many people are with it on our kind of core team, but I mean, it's big, right? So when you're talking about stakeholder management and how to kind of bring people in and change that culture, yeah, it's almost at every level, right? So you have the SMEs, right? The engineers, and then you have the line managers, you have their managers, then you have leadership who's helping kind of drive it from the top. But it's a matter of really partnering with those line managers to have a deep understanding, yeah, of not only what is their role, but they're going to be really pivotal in also helping you kind of get kind of the adoption and influence the team to kind of come on board. Because a lot of times the engineers are like, I don't have time for this. Like, are you kidding me? I'm so busy. So it's about building those relationships and that influence at all levels in the organization. So that's another reason why it takes 2 to 3 years, right? I can't just walk in and be like, hey, we're doing this thing. You just need to come. They're like, are you kidding me? So it takes a lot. And I think it starts with, again, painting that picture. I think you mentioned earlier consulting. I do feel like there is a large part of L&D that needs to be that consulting piece so that you understand the business, you understand how to manage those stakeholders, how to tell that story, how to paint that picture so that people do see the value. And then you can start bringing people into your that sphere to be able to help influence the people that are really key. And I'll just say one thing that I've noticed in my time is that people normally try to go to the top to influence, and they go straight to the VP, the senior VP. I'm sorry, but at large organizations, those people don't really have time, right? And I feel like it's fruitless in a lot of ways, but I think you need their presence and I think you need their buy-in. But really, the people who are making the decisions are the people who support the executive team, right? So there's usually either a chief of staff or a talent manager or someone in there who's helping kind of behind the scenes run the either initiatives, however organizations do it. They're the brains behind it all, who usually have also the connection into the business, who have the really strong relationships. So I think it's also about knowing who do you need to go to influence, instead of just assuming, let me go to the top or let me go to this one leader. Who you have to understand that it's multi-directional, and you have to really have a good understanding, I think, of who's the ones who are making the decisions and who can have the most impact.
Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. You also talked about, and this is a common challenge. Most organizations and most L&D people would have heard it. We don't have time for training. We started off the conversation with this. But have you tried anything especially for that? Because the favorite response from L&D these days is, let's make it micro. And which is a okay solution for some situations, maybe brilliant in some cases, but it may not be, workable in all situations. And on the other hand, we keep seeing organizations who are trying to have something like learning events, a learning week or a learning month, or even putting some time on calendars for learning, etc. So have you tried, or which one of these have you tried to really make time available or handle that objection, which is time?
Yeah, that's a big one. Yes, we hear that every day. And what I'll say to that first is that what came up for me was, if it's impactful and it's going to help them, they will make time. First of all, I've noticed that if it's something that is going to solve a problem for them, or it's going to add a tremendous amount of value, people will make time. Secondly, what came to my mind was, a few years back, I worked on a really large program that went out to, I think it was like 8,000 or 9,000 employees. And so when I came into the project, some of it had already been designed. But coming back to this time piece, as we were hearing a lot, like, yeah, I don't have time. This is really hard to make time to take this training. And I started looking at it, again, putting on my consulting hat, and I was kind of taking a broad view. I started looking at the platform, how we were delivering the training, what modalities we were using, how people were consuming the training. And it came clear as day to me. I said, oh my gosh, it's not we don't have time or the content isn't right. It's how we are delivering this training to them is not effective to them at all. Like the tool we were using was just really cumbersome. And once we were able to really streamline all of that and really, again, look at the experience, how can we deliver the training to them when they needed it, how they needed it, it completely changed the mindset where it was like night and day. They said, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Like, this is what we need. But again, it's not always just looking at designing the content itself or even just the delivery platform, but looking at the whole experience, right? How are people coming into the learning? Where are they going to be learning it from? How do they want to learn from their mobile devices? Do they need to have more do they need to be more fluid? Do we need to have different ways that they, again, just interact and experience the platform maybe itself? So that's what I did was I helped revamp the entire platform and process. And that just, it changed the entire experience. And we started shifting away from, I don't have time to, we need more. We need more of this training. But again, it goes back to really just getting curious and really putting on kind of that consultant hat and going, okay, what problems do I see coming up here? And what am I hearing? And where do I see kind of those roadblocks coming up for people? And how can I help remove them? How can I help maybe streamline this process so it makes it easier for them to consume the training, take the assessments, right? Make sure that we're tracking people, like the whole thing. Like, how do we streamline that so people just have an easier experience? And a lot of times it's as simple as that. Sometimes I think we make our lives a lot more difficult than we have to. And of course, politics always plays into it, especially in a big company and, all of those wonderful things. But can we maybe remove ourselves a bit from that? I think that's also a big pain point that we haven't talked about yet, but the politics in organizations can be really tough. And sometimes it gets in our way, right, of actually delivering what is needed to the end customer. So how can we try and remove as much of that as possible and take a broader view and look at the overall experience to help solve some of these problems, in addition to asking lots of questions and doing our due diligence? I think a lot of those things will help shift that mindset and that culture.
Fantastic. I really liked when you said, if you're really solving a problem that they worry about, they'll make time. And for the project that you talked about, where you entered kind of midway in the project, once you make it effective, that's when people really get interested in it. So we can keep dumping ineffective training and blame people that they don't have time, they're not interested, they're not motivated. But maybe at some level we are spoiling our brand because they know this is what we want to get, so they're not interested. So if we can make it effective and over a period of time, the brand also gets built.
Yep. I mean, to me, those are symptoms, right? You say, I'm not interested. I don't have time. I'm not motivated. To me, those, if I were coaching, it would be like, okay, I need to explore those deeper, because that's not truly indicative of what's going on. It's more of a just react. This is what I'm feeling. I'm reacting to something, but what is that something? And yeah, in the project I was talking about, it had been architected and it had been designed. I came in midstream. It was almost about to launch. And I was like, no, I think we need to completely revamp this, because we're hearing a lot of feedback that it's cumbersome to use. It's not an effective tool. They don't have time to sit here and try and figure out where to find training. We need to make this simpler. I'm a big simplifier. I love simplifying things, but yeah, I mean, that changed the whole trajectory of the whole entire program, because now it became more about how do we experience that? And then what becomes next, the natural progression is how do we build on that? So how do we build on what is built? So I look at it as like a foundation, right? We're laying this foundation. How do we now build the skills on top of that so that people can be effective, right? And so that we can address, so they'll see then those symptoms start going away. Oh, I'm more motivated. I have more time. Yeah, because this means something to me, right? Imagine you, like someone gives you something, or you're taking some kind of training and it's not at all aligned to what you're interested in. You're not getting any value out of it. Are you going to really want to make time to sit through it and watch it? I mean, just human behavior is going to say, no, I have better things to do. Right. So to me, that's always a symptom. That's always a sign to go, okay, we need to go a little deeper and dig a little deeper here to figure out what's really behind that lack of motivation or that lack of engagement.
Yeah. Yep. Some success with learning is always helpful in building further motivation.
Yes. Right.
It reminds me of those Starbucks cards or some of those where you get 2 holes already punched. So you just think I have just 8 more to do or whatever. But yeah, some early success has already been handed over to you and you get more motivated. Yeah,
right.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So Jen, for people who want to, really get down on this path where they begin to solve the right problems, we've discussed how to, do a few things about listening, analysis, root cause, etc. But is there a recommended process that you can suggest for people who want to do it, or steps? Okay, do this, do this, do this, do this, and probably you will be learning along the way and doing more things much better in future.
Yeah. The first thing that's coming up for me is it's probably not going to be the answer that you might be looking for. But for me, I am a big proponent of being trained in how to effectively facilitate and manage conversations, how to apply these coaching principles, because I can't stress it enough, because when you were talking about assumptions earlier, I mean, that's like step number 1 in coaching is you learn to identify assumptions and remove as many of those as possible, because that's the thing that gets in your way. The minute we start assuming things, that's when we start addressing the symptoms. Also, design thinking, I think, is extremely powerful for just, again, when we're talking about shifting that mindset around how to think and solve problems differently. That for me was probably one of the biggest game changers for me, as far as like how I approach problems and how I approach these programs that I had been building for many years, is how do I take that methodology and that approach to how I design the learning experience. So I'm a big advocate of those two. I mean, there's tons of, different processes and certifications and, but I am a huge believer in getting to the right problems, or the best solving the problems for our customers, whoever those are, through asking more questions. I just think if you can develop that skill set as an L&D professional, you will be far and away doing all the great things that L&D professionals do, and you'll be helping and serving your customers in the best way possible. So that would be my answer. I don't know if it's what you're looking for, but that's my approach.
Yeah, I was kind of aware that you may not have a step-by-step process for this, but yeah, a few things to think of and start adapting, because I think people develop their own mechanisms and processes depending on the context they are applying it. But yeah, these are very helpful guidelines. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the key, right? Is because I personally don't like telling people like you need to follow this step-by-step process, because you're right. Everybody's different and everybody takes a different approach, and that's great. And we need that diversity, right? But at the same time, I think there's some core things that we can all do more of that will help as you define your own process for how to maybe uncover some of these symptoms and get a little bit deeper on these problems. Develop your own process. And that's probably where it's coming from, is I'm more of a rebel. Like I like to develop my own processes, and I like to figure out what works for me and use my strengths, right? Knowing my strengths really well, and how do I leverage those to, help deliver results to the end customer. So that's kind of my approach.
Yeah. One last question for you, Jen, then. For people who are in environments which, from a cultural perspective, are not very supportive, is there any advice that you can give them apart from asking the right questions? Because yeah, if you can ask the questions, but if the culture is not right, you may still not be going very far down that road.
Yeah, I mean, I think it takes time. So the place that I always go to is I always go back to, again, curiosity. I know it sounds like I'm beating this over the head, but it's my approach, right? It's my approach to something. When I hear someone resisting something, that is always an indicator to me to go, okay, so what can I do to explore this more to help open their minds, right? Because that's at the end of the day, what I'm trying to do is help people broaden and open their minds to be able to see new possibilities. And how do I do that personally is through being really curious, but also demonstrate it. I'm also a big believer in I don't wait. Like if I'm waiting for my leadership team to give me a green light on something, I'll be waiting a really long time. I take it upon myself and I say, okay, I have relationships with people in this business. I know it's in need. My boss has said like, hey, we need to fix this. I'll go off and I'll just start doing it. And I'll just start uncovering. I'll start putting together kind of that strategy in my head of what and paint that picture. So then I can come back to my boss and my team who may not be supportive and say, look, this is what I've uncovered. And hey, I've talked to the stakeholders over there who have a lot of influence. And oh yeah, now it's on the VP's method for next year. It's a priority for them, right? Like, so how can you maybe influence in different ways to be able to then take it back to the culture of your organization to help? So I think the influencing can happen at different areas, different levels. But for me, I have never been one to wait for the culture to change. I am just going to take it upon myself to try and change it as much as I can. And how can I do that? Through influencing and through curiosity and through getting those stakeholders on board, right? I tell people all the time, don't wait. If you're waiting for someone to give you a golden or the red carpet rolled out for you to wait for you to have the perfect opportunity, it's not going to happen, especially in big organizations. So you have to take it upon yourself sometimes and just really get curious and really paint that picture for them. I think that helps.
Oh, that's
At least in my
fantastic.
experience.
Yeah, I mean that's
Yeah.
actually brilliant, and I see it as uh, uh, curiosity backed by action, and thus
Yep.
not just being curious, because otherwise it's meaningless. So that, and of course, believing that every small influence at some stage will impact the culture in
Yes.
future, but that's what is in our control. So we should not be really sitting back and waiting for the culture to change, but do what we
Right.
can do.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, you think about it in any context, right? If I thought
Right.
here, like the US government, oh my gosh, I wish things would change, I would never do anything, right? Like I can't. But can I do something right in my community level? Can I do something in my neighborhood? Can I do small things even just with people I interact with every day, right? To make change. It happens from that area too. So I think it's important to know, like, if you want to change something, be that. Whatever it is you want to see change, start living it and being it and influencing that. Yeah. So I'm a big believer in that.
Yep, I think that's really fantastic. It's both practical and
Mhm.
uh, it's both at the same time being very satisfactory, because you will at the end of the day be doing something rather than waiting for something. Yeah,
Exactly.
brilliant.
Yeah. I think at a large company, you learn that quickly too. It's a big boulder and you can't really roll it up the hill too easily on your own. You have to figure out ways to, um, yeah, make
Hmm,
an impact in different ways.
brilliant. It's been a
Yeah.
fantastic conversation, Jen. Thank you so much for sharing all
Yeah.
these insights from your 2 decades of experience. It was really insightful. I
Yeah.
really
Thank
appreciate
you.
your time today.
I appreciate you. I appreciate you having me on the podcast and I appreciate having this discussion. So thank you.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you.